Right to go? As Führer Dan Andrews would say. Now, thank you for coming here today, everybody. It's much appreciated. Now, the proposition facing Victorians this Saturday is a very simple one. It's a simple proposition. Do we reward the Premier Dan Andrews with a third term, or do we not? Now, it is an important question because, as everybody knows, you get what you deserve and what you reward. Now, if you reward corruption, you can expect more corruption. If you reward lies, you can expect more lies. If you reward incompetence, well, guess what? You can expect more incompetence. Now, vote for Premier Dan Andrews on Saturday only serves to reward the worst Premier that Australia has ever seen. Now, protect yourself from this bad Premier and vote 1 UAP on Saturday. Now, some things that the Premier has done: the Belt and Roads Initiative with the CCP, the triple O wait times, the world's longest lockdown, multiple IBAC inquiries. How many? 5. And he's just been referred to a 6th. That's what he's done. Now, any one of those things is enough of a reason to kick the failed Premier, Mr. Dan Andrews, to the curb. Any one of those things. But taken together, ladies and gents, they represent failings so epic that future generations will study this period of Victorian history as a warning of what can happen when stupidity is rewarded at the ballot box. Now, when us Victorians go to the polls on Saturday, we should not reward Premier Dan Andrews with more time to destroy our beloved Victoria. We must not reward gross incompetence. We must punish it. We must not embolden corruption. We must ruthlessly cut it out like the cancer that it is. We must not honour a dishonourable man by electing him for a third time to the highest office in our state. Victorians, we deserve better than this. We do. This Saturday at the ballot box, make your voice heard. This Saturday at the ballot box, demand better. This Saturday at the ballot box, save Victoria. This Saturday at the ballot box, save Victoria and vote 1 UAP in the upper house. Thank you. Now, ladies and gents, I will now present to you our chairman, Mr. Clive Palmer.
Thank you, Bruce. Well, it's great to be here in Victoria. I can tell you, as a Queenslander, Victoria's got quite a reputation across the country. I'm here today because I want to send a message to Gruppenführer Dan Andrews, hiding up there in Crown Casino with all of his bodyguards, and of course he needs those bodyguards because he's been true to his reputation, and he's goose-stepped Victorians for so long, and he's destroyed so many people's lives. After all, it was Dan Andrews who was presided over a police force that decided to shoot Australians in the back, that decided to arrest pregnant women in their houses, decided to close down debate and cause mayhem in this state by mandatory vaccinations, decided to shut down small businesses and to send families to the wall. That's why he's got a reputation. That's why he's known throughout Australia. You know, before the last federal election, our party predicted what would happen with interest rates, and we offered solutions to Australians. We did it because we want to protect and defend them, their livelihoods and their families. And since that time, everything that we said has become true. People have seen what's happening. And they should realise that we're a party that cares about the community, cares about the outcomes for our families. And we have here in Victoria over 17,500 members in the United Australia Party. And we were the only party really standing in the upper house with any hope of holding the balance of power and stopping Dan Andrews in his tracks. And it's so important, not just for Victorians, but for all Australians, that there's a message sent across the nation that Victoria makes a stand for freedom and a fight for the individual rights of citizens. And we've seen masks come up in this election. We've seen the Teals take off their mask and say, we support Dan Andrews. That's why we're here. We've seen that happen. We've seen Glenn Drury say that he's running about 50 candidates in the upper house to stop us controlling the upper house. He's doing that. Why? Because he wants to support the Greens and he wants to support the Labor Party. He wants to support Dan Andrews. All of these people can be paid off. We can't be paid off. I can't be paid off. Either can Ralph Babbitt be paid off or our leader, Jeff Shaw. We're standing because we want to make a change for the citizens of Victoria. I was born in the Footscray Hospital. I lived the first 10 years of my life in Williamstown. I went to school in St Mary's in Williamstown. My father established a Melbourne radio station, 3AK, back in 1933. Was a silent actor. And my mother came here during the war to make ammunition when she was 15 to support our forces in Papua New Guinea. And there's a deep commitment in my heart for this state, for the things that I've known and followed in AFL, people like Teddy Whitten and others that have fought hard to give examples to our younger people and what we should be and what we could become. And this is an opportunity for all Victorians to make a change and to make sure that whoever you vote for in the lower house, be it Liberal or Labor, vote for insurance on your freedom, on your right to live a free and happy life, to run a business, to have a job, decide what you want to do. We guarantee, our party, that we will ensure that there are no more lockdowns in Victoria, that there's no more destruction of families. And that's why we're standing in this election. I just want to introduce to you all now our leader, Jeff Shaw, and then we'll all take some questions. Jeff, do you want to come through?
Thanks. Thanks, Clive.
Thanks.
The Victoria I grew up in is not that anymore. I can't remember the Victoria I grew up in. I have some vivid memories as a kid and into business, but these last 7 or 8 years have been quite depressive. There's this dark cloud of Dan Andrews that's been over this state. We have a chance, Victorians, this election, to remove that dark cloud, to let the sun shine in again into Victoria. A vote for the United Australia Party is the only vote in the upper house that will protect the freedoms and the families and of individuals and businesses. Because as the Liberal Party have moved further to the left to Labor, and Labor have moved further to the left to the Greens, and the Greens, well, they've just gone further to the left to insanity, we are the only ones as a United Australia Party that offer the freedoms, that offer families a hope and a future. No more lockdowns, no more huge debts, no more belittling people both at individual levels and at community levels like Dan Andrews has done. Victoria, it's time to say that's enough, and that's why we're all standing. We're all standing saying, that's enough, Dan Andrews. We want you out. We'll take some questions.
Now, we received donations from about 10 people. Are you sure you have the finances to be able to contest this election?
Well, we're running a upper house campaign, and because Dan Andrews has limited donations and really just made that to be suitable to the Labor Party and the Liberal Party. So Labor Party have an unlimited source of money coming straight from trade unions. Liberal Party have a more of a limited source from their Cormac Foundation, and parties like us and new parties, it's not a level playing field. We're unable to raise those funds like they have because they've locked it into a two-party system.
Well, there's obviously, you might not be able to raise as much given the cap is 4,300, but you've only raised donations from 10 people.
Okay.
You can raise
Can I
donations.
say a few words?
Yep.
Well, first of all, it's the first time someone's ever said we haven't raised enough money for elections. It's a very pleasant question to have, that you're not accusing us of winning the election by funding. But governments may rise and fall, but ideas go on forever. And this election is about ideas. The people of Victoria know what we stand for. Craig Kelly was here at the time of trouble, and he stood up against the Victorian government. Over 250,000 people were demonstrating against the vaccine policy. Australians know what we stand for. I spent over $100 million donating to this party in the last election. We ran extensive advertisements down here trying to protect people and their interest rates. Our research shows that message resonates with the people of Victoria, that they've seen what the Albanese government has done yesterday, announcing vaccine passports for all Australians in the future, signing a memorandum at the G20. They know who talks with a forked tongue. And on Saturday, you'll see that we have the balance of power in Victoria and things will be different. Thank you.
The cost of
of living crisis is at the forefront of a lot of people's minds. What policies do you have in place that will help alleviate some of that pressure?
Can I also answer, just going back to your question there, we also have a lot of good supporters on the ground. So it's not all about money, even though that would be nice. We have a lot of good supporters and hard-working candidates on the ground that would want to make sure that this election's competitive. So you asked about policies? Cost of living, it's a huge issue. And, you know, some people say that governments don't have much to do with that, but they certainly do. Interest rates is one. Not limiting supply like Dan Andrews causing a crisis and people fighting over toilet paper for another. And basic economics will tell us as demand increases, so too, and supply decreases, there's going to be an increase in prices. And Dan Andrews has allowed this to happen from his complete mismanagement. I won't blame everything onto him, but it's certainly a start and continues with his lack of endorsement for small businesses and lack of endorsements for growth in this area outside of his own government.
The healthcare sector as well is obviously in a crisis. He's blamed COVID repeatedly. Is it fair to blame the pandemic?
I blame Dan's lockdowns on a lot of things. I don't blame a pandemic. It was a Dan-demic that did all this. And he was a health minister since 2008, so I don't know if you're aware. I'll give you a little bit of a history lesson. 2008, he's been the health minister. And so he's been in charge of health either as health minister or premier for 10 of the last 14 years. Now, if I was given 10 years to do something and was consistently stuffing it up and always my portfolio was saying there was a crisis, that's a failure. Senator Ralph said before about the failures that Andrews has done from debt, from lockdowns. This is another failure in the health system. Completely, it's got nothing to do with a pandemic. It's got everything to do with Dan and his mismanagement.
Can I just say one point there, just add to you mentioned COVID, right? It's a fact that Dan Andrews was a member of the so-called National Cabinet, which authorised the purchase of 485 million vaccines for the 23 million Australians. You imagine how much money that cost and how much was wasted that should have gone into hospitals in Victoria. And the waiting lists in Victoria, New South Wales and Queensland in particular are enormous for people with cancer needing urgent things because the money in the budget's been spent on COVID and the money's been shifted offshore. But the media were all sucked in by that as well. No one put any financial analysis on the fact that why are we buying 485 million vaccines? That's a serious question. And it really goes to the issue of lobbyists in this country that are paid by pharmaceutical companies, former members of the Labor Party, to be lobbyists so that they can ensure that their funding is not cut and that profits remain in the United States and that people in Victoria suffer and don't get the healthcare that they deserve. It's a disgrace, really.
Where did you get the 485 million figure from?
You only have to do a search and go back to the announcements of the purchase of vaccines in this country to find out by the Prime Minister, Scott Morrison, who presided over the so-called National Cabinet, to come up with those figures. But I'm sure you can count. I'm sure you can realise there are less than 485 million Australians. And of course, what did we do then? After they were about to expire, those vaccines, we shipped them off to Papua New Guinea and Fiji, right, to avoid responsibility. And of course, no one in the press reported that gross misuse of Australian taxpayer funds. And that's why our hospitals are in trouble in Victoria, that the money's not just there. The debt's run up to over $1 trillion federally because of these actions that have been taken, and the revenue base has been destroyed by lockdowns for Dan Andrews of the business community in Victoria. Victoria is one of the strongest parts of the economy that should have produced more revenue for the government. It hasn't done it because people have lost all they could through the actions of Dan Andrews in closing down the state. And of course, you've got to ask yourself, why is the Australian death rate today 17% higher than it was in previous years? Is that a coincidence? Is that a coincidence? Is it either the fact we've had the vaccine, or is it the fact that we haven't been able to get good health care for our people? It doesn't matter in either combination. Dan Andrews is responsible. Remember the 1,000 of people nearly that died with COVID because Dan Andrews, his party, recruited security guards to man the hotel and quarantine. And what did they do? They had sex with them. And they spread the disease and over 1,000 people died. But Dan Andrews is responsible for those deaths. He's responsible for those families, and he needs to be brought to account. So this state should get serious. Its media should get serious and start investigating these things because these are the real issues, and we've got to hold him to account. I think it's disgraceful that 1,000 people die because of Dan Andrews is so incompetent employing security guards. It's shocking. Sorry, Jeff.
Australia didn't order anywhere near 485 million vaccines. I just googled it, and
Well, there you are.
the security guards didn't have sex with
Well,
guests
look-
either. What are you basing these claims on?
Well, yeah, I'm sure that's true. We have the figures. I can send them to you, but Google's not my source of responses. I don't rely on Google for everything I say. I don't want my views to be manipulated by social media. And you need to do some serious investigation and get the Treasury papers and see what money was sent to pharmaceutical companies, how many vaccines were actually bought. And a lot of the vaccines were classified as being bought for the South Pacific. And not,
Where's the claim about security guards having sex with
well,
guests
that's,
from?
I've got direct evidence of that. You know, there's no question about that.
Are you
And
going
Dan,
to present it?
well, not today, right now, because we're here for another purpose, and Jeff's really here to talk about that. But I can't stand by, really, and not holding this fellow to account for the deaths of many people. And, you know, if anyone's a Nazi, of course, it's Dan Andrews. There's no doubt about that, right? He's the one that had people shot on our Shrine of Remembrance, a great disgrace, right? He had pregnant women arrested in their home. He's the one that caused mandatory injection, much the same as Goebbels or other people did, to take away people's freedoms, to take away their right to exist is a serious question. And he needs to be brought to account for the 17% higher death rate. You can get that from the Australian Bureau of Statistics. That's the 20% death rate, 17% death rate over previous years is happening right now in Australia. And that's a disgrace. And journalists like you need to get onto the statistics and report that fact and tell me why are those people dying. Okay? Oh, sorry, Jeff.
Okay. Any other questions?
Okay, we might leave it there then. Okay.
Thanks.
Bye.